Hello, wonderful people. Have you had thoughts about nihilism? Like, nothing matters. You wake up in the morning and think, what's the point of all this? Well, I've been there. And what's helped me is A Course in Miracles. And we're going to read it together, and I'm going to give my commentary. And hopefully, after that, you'll start to have some sense of meaning in your life. If you're new here, hi, I'm Kahir. I'm here to take you one step closer to self-love. All right. And we left off from page 55, part 9, so we're going to continue from 10. The ego is afraid of spirit's joy, because once you have experienced it, you will withdraw all protection from the ego and become totally without investment in the fear. Your investment is great now, because fear is a witness to the separation, and your ego rejoices when you witness to it. Leave it behind. Do not listen to it, and do not preserve it. Listen only to God, who is as incapable of deception as the spirit he created. Release yourself and release others. Do not present a false and unworthy picture of yourself to others, and do not accept such a picture of them yourself. And like I said, guys, like investment in fear, right? So we invest in the Holy Spirit and God, the voice of God, which is like the voice of love, of joy, of peace, right? The voice that tells you, you can do it. I believe in you. I love you. You are magnificent. I love you no matter what. This is the voice of God, right? The other voice, and if you're familiar, the nihilistic voice, like, nothing fucking matters. Just eat, consume, pleasure. Oh, why are you pleasuring? Oh, I hate you, right? Is that the voice of God or the voice of the ego, right? You have to discern and follow the voice of God. The ego has built a shabby and unsettling home for you, because it cannot build otherwise. Do not try to make this impoverished house stand. Its weakness is your strength. Only God could make a home that is worthy of his creations, who have chosen to leave it empty by their own disposition. Yet his home will stand forever and is ready for you when you choose to enter it. Of this you can be wholly certain. A God is as incapable of creating the perishable as the ego is of making the eternal. Right? So when we believe in this nihilism, we're trying to make this impoverished house stand. Right? It's shabby and unsheltering home. Like if we believe in this random, chaotic universe where just a bunch of hairless apes fighting for fucking resources, nothing matters, seek pleasure, fuck everybody over, all about me. What do you think what is that going to give you guys? Honestly, have you tried it? And when I was, like for me, I still had resistance because of my spiritual beliefs, right? But still there in that deep subconscious mind, especially like my father especially was like kind of this nihilistic view. It's like all about, just get the money. We're just here to survive. It's all about you, nothing, and that's not a good framework for me. I'd also encourage for you, if you're feeling this sense of meaninglessness and this sense of darkness, right? Because we're feeding the ego, right? We're accepting the ego in this shitty little house is giving us instead of going with the Holy Spirit, with this grand, like castle. You're exchanging something valuable for something worthless. And this is exactly what we're doing when we're believing in the ego, when we're believing in this like nihilistic viewpoint. Of your ego, you can do nothing to save yourself or others, but of your spirit, you can do everything for the salvation of both. Humility is a lesson for the ego, not for the spirit. Spirit is beyond humility because it recognizes its radiance and gladly sheds its light everywhere. The meek shall inherit the earth because their egos are humble, and this gives them truer perception. The kingdom of heaven is a spirit's right, whose beauty and dignity are far beyond doubt, beyond perception, and stand forever as the mark of the love of God for his creations, who are wholly worthy of him and only of him. Nothing else is sufficiently worthy to be a gift for a creation of God himself. Isn't that just like beautiful, guys? The kingdom of heaven is a spirit's right. right? Whose beauty and dignity are far beyond doubt, right? And this is the thing. I feel like when we're nihilistic, we're doubting the kingdom of heaven, right? We're seeing with the ego's eyes, with this war, this scarcity, this lack, cruelty, betrayal. I think what's hard about it, of course, because there's physical evidence, right? We see it. We see it, we see it in the body's eyes, but not for the spirit's eyes. What does this mean? Like, I'm sure you guys had some very challenging parts of your life, and maybe in the moment it was super challenging, but in hindsight, is how magnificent it was. It was like a growth for you, you know. But yes, I don't want to say there's no evil, there's no bad, and I think that's a lot what course students tend to do. It was like, oh, it's all, but it's the same. I think it's just being like a nihilist, like nothing matters. All right. When I say about my philosophy, like improv, it's like we say yes and to life. Like, oh, the Epstein files are coming. Oh, yes. All right, what can we do about it? Right? Because, and you could say, oh, we're powerless. But more and more people, it's like normal people, normal YouTubers are just going through the files, right? And they're talking about it, right? All this stuff is coming out, right? And like I said, like normal people going through the files, talking about it, right? We have some influence, right? Even like if you make 1% of a difference, that's still something, guys. That's still something, right? I used to also like just not acknowledge the small steps, right? But the small steps are everything. It's even in this book, Atomic Habits, I keep talking about is, our brain is wired when we have like these two big ideas. We like our brain is like no. But if you're like a small step, your brain's like, oh, okay, maybe, and that small step can plant a seed, and that seed can grow to a giant tree, right? But if we believe in this meaninglessness, like, oh, I'm not even gonna plant the seed. You see what I mean? How destructive that can be. I will substitute for your ego if you wish, but never for your spirit. A father can safely leave a child with an elder brother who has shown himself responsible, but this involves no confusion about the child's origin. The brother, which is Jesus, can protect the child's body and his ego, but he does not confuse himself with the father because he does this. I can be entrusted with your body and your ego only because this enables you not to be concerned with them. And let me teach you their unimportance. I could not understand their importance to you if I had not once been tempted to believe in them myself. Let us undertake to learn this lesson together so we can be free of them together. I need devoted teachers who share my aim of healing the mind. Spirit is far beyond the need of your protection or mine. Remember this. In this world, you need not have tribulation, because I have overcome the world. That is why you should be of good cheer. Damn, guys, right? When I was believing this nihilistic viewpoint, when I say nihilism might be strong, but I had, very, especially if you guys watch my videos about, like, my dark night, so 25, 26, just like waking up and just feeling with this sense of meaninglessness, hopelessness, I was not of good cheer, right? And I think, and the purpose of the channel is to give a voice, because I know so many of my brothers and sisters out there, but my brothers out there, how many people were like me, where they were just struggling in silence, right? I know it happened happened a few years ago, but I have the grace now to look at my past self with love. But before, I wasn't able to give myself grace. I was like, oh, what a piece of shit. He's struggling, right? And I just can't. I almost say I can't believe I had that attitude, but I believe it because I understand where the attitude came from. From disempowering narrative from my parents, which is my ego, right? The exact opposite of spirit. In this world, you need not have tribulation, because I have overcome the world. That is why you should be of good cheer, right? Damn. But not to say what you're going through doesn't matter, or, oh, you should be happy. That's like toxic positivity. But like I said, accepting where you are, unconditionally, and this is something I had to work on and I still work on, but it's miles better, just accepting without judgment. That's the thing. Because I thought if I accept myself, that means like I'm admitting I'm a piece of shit or I'm a bitch. No, 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 no. It's not that. It's like, things are unpreferred right now. Things are unpreferred. I'm not happy, right? Because if you don't even acknowledge the problem, how can you fix it, right? Like when I acknowledge I need to seek therapy. As a guy, dude, like I had acknowledged I had anger problems, but you can't change a problem that you don't take responsibility over. Or a challenge, rather. You can't take it. You can't accept responsibility for a challenge. You can't change it. And for me, there was a resistance. And I told that to my mom one time, and she's like mocked me. It's not being like an asshole to yourself, bro. It's about being like so loving and kind. They're like, I see we're struggling here. What's going on? How can I help? How can we help? How can we get out of this situation? Or how can we first accept it? Accept it. And what can we focus on the solution? Simple stuff, but I wasn't doing it. It was very hard to be a good cheer. We move on to the next part here, the ego and the false autonomy. It is reasonable to ask how the mind could ever have made the ego. In fact, it is the best question you could ask. There is, however, no point in giving an answer in terms of the past, because the past does not matter. And history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. Abstract thought applies to knowledge because knowledge is completely impersonal, and examples are irrelevant to its understanding. Perception, however, is always specific and therefore quite concrete. Everyone makes an ego or a self for himself, which is subject to enormous variation because of its instability. He also makes an ego for everyone else he perceives, which is equally variable. Their interaction is a process that alters both, because they were not made by or with the unalterable. It is important to realize that this alteration can and does occur as readily when the interaction takes place in the mind as when it involves physical proximity. Thinking about another ego is as effective in changing relative perception as in physical interaction. There could be no better example that the ego is only an idea and not a fact. Okay, yes. Because when we're believing in the ego, we're relying on our own strength. This is when I also believe in meaninglessness. It's like, how could I possibly get out of this? I am such a piece of shit. I am worthless. I can't do anything right? And this is just a false reality. It's not fact. I love what the Course said. Like, the past does not matter, right? History would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. You look at it, all the things that are happening over and over again, like the endless war in Iran and stuff. It's like, have we learned nothing? Also, when I think about my own journey into meaninglessness, it was like I was discrediting myself, right? I was believing in this false image of myself. It wasn't real, right? I wasn't questioning. Is this real? Is this real here? Is it really like everything he touches to garbage? I didn't even question it, right? But even we just start questioning, is this true? Is this who I really am, right? And then we see like the light that's beneath, that's underneath all this dark and heavy clouds of shame. That's who we really are. You know what I mean? Your own state of mind is a good example how the ego was made. When you threw knowledge away, it is as if you never had it. This is so apparent that one need only recognize it to see that it does happen. If this occurs in the present, why is it surprising that it occurred in the past? Surprise is a reasonable response to the unfamiliar, though hardly to something that occurs with such persistence. But do not forget that the mind need not work that way, even though it does work that way. Think of the love of animals for their offspring and the need that they feel to protect them. That is because they regard them as part of themselves. No one dismisses something he considers part of himself. You react to your ego much as God does to his creations, with love, protection, and charity. Your reaction to the self you made are not surprising. In fact, they resemble in many ways how you will one day react to your real creations which are as timeless as you are. The question is not how you respond to the ego, but what you believe you are. Belief is an ego function, and as long as your origin is open to belief, you are regarding it from an ego viewpoint. When teaching is no longer necessary, you will merely know God. Belief that there is another way of perceiving is the loftiest idea which ego thinking is capable. That is because it contains a hint of recognition that the ego is not the self. Yes, so basically, I feel like the crux of the issue of nihilism is the belief in the separation. I am separate from all that is, and I must protect myself. I must protect this image. And even if that means, like for me, like protecting my image of like this lower nature self, this disempowered version, it's like, oh no, I'm not even gonna question it. I'm not gonna even like try to experiment to see if it's true. Right? If it's like, oh, like oh, I'm so anxious, which, I'm not a type of guy to go to a party like by himself or something like that. But hear me out. I do lead an improv group and I do improv comedy and I go on stage. This is like a paradox. In my mind, not everyone can do improv. Well, like everyone, I mean. It's like and when we're entrenched in this separation, like, oh, this life is meaningless, we're just hairless apes. I see it all around me. We're protecting that and not questioning it, right? And there's something, like I mentioned in my previous videos about like, with our brain chemistry, like we like this old version of ourselves, right? Because it's familiar. We think the ego is the self, and we perpetuate it. We constantly look for confirmation, or like I'm this lower nature self. Look at this, and it's like we kind of like being a victim, like as in like, oh, because it's familiar. It's not like nourishing, but there's some kind of sick pleasure in it. If you know, you know. Undermining the ego's thought system must be perceived as painful, even though this is anything but true. Babies scream in rage if you take away a knife or scissors, although they may well harm themselves if you do not. In this sense, you are still a baby. You have no sense of real self-preservation, and are likely to decide that you need precisely what would hurt you most. Yet whether or not you recognize it now, you have agreed to cooperate in the effort to become both harmless and helpful, attributes that must go together. Your attitudes, even towards this, are necessarily conflicted because all attitudes are ego-based. This will not last. Be patient a while and remember that the outcome is as certain as God. What's coming up to my mind is that, when we're going through this transformation, it might be painful for the mind, like it certainly was for me when I had the dark night of the soul and all this. However, like all this stuff I was valuing, like, like for me, like when I talked about going to the acting school in Poland, I valued it. I was like, oh, I need this, I need this. Like, how else am I going to be an actor? How else am I going to make, friends? Because all this bullshit, like, I believed I had to do it, It was taken away. It was painful. It was good. Well, of course, my behavior, but, but still, it's painful. Like, it was like, I had like the sense of relief. I also think about this culture, right? Many of us, I've experienced it too, not to like a very huge amount. I'm not going, like, when it comes to like work, how many of us like have these jobs that like take your life force away? I felt it. I fucking felt it. Like I said, I took a sip of the Matrix, but still, it was. I can't imagine that. I know, and like, I know some of my brothers and sisters out there, they have something like that, and I know something about the macro level, but still, like, imagine you lose that kind of job. It might be very painful, but then like you see, like, oh man, well, what if I was being saved? You know what I mean? Maybe this belief in nihilism gives you something, in the sense of, well, I could tell you what this, when I believed in meaninglessness, it led me to just be like completely not to give a shit about anything. And I thought that's what I wanted, I could just like lay on the couch, play games, survive, even though like deep down, I knew that wasn't what I wanted. But because I believe in meaninglessness, it's like, oh, since nothing I do matters, let's just not try. Let's not just try, you know? And on the outside, it's so easy to fucking yell at those people, like, "What you fucking lazy little bitch? What the fuck are you doing with your life, you garbage kid?" You know? It's really easy to look at the behavior and not be like, maybe this guy just doesn't fucking believe in anything. You know what I mean? Only those who have a real and lasting sense of abundance can be truly charitable. This is obvious when you consider what is involved. To the ego, to give anything implies that you will have to do without it. When you associate giving with sacrifice, give only because you believe that you are somehow getting something better and can therefore do without the thing you give. Giving to get is an inescapable law of the ego, which always evaluates itself in relation to other egos. It is therefore continually preoccupied with the belief in scarcity that gave rise to it. Its whole perception of other egos as real is only an attempt to convince itself that it is real. Self-esteem in ego terms meaning nothing more than the ego has diluted itself in accepting its reality, and therefore temporarily less predatory. This self-esteem is always vulnerable to stress, a term which refers to any perceived threat to the ego's existence. Just like when I was reading it, just like my mind, I was going to, Eyes Wide Shut, if you guys know that movie, which is like more pertinent than ever. So I watched it last night. So like with all this whole Epstein stuff and showing those mass parties, all that, that's like just like the ego glorified, showing like giving to get. And when I said this belief in nihilism, I'm like, oh, I'll only give you something if I get something even better out of it. And we could see how destructive that is, and that like in that movie, they just like looked at people as objects. So Epstein looked at like people as objects, and that's where it's taking it to the extreme. We can also go to like the micro level in our own lives, and when I was with this nihilistic thing, like I was not even thinking about how I could be of service, and I was miserable. Like, of course, I always had like this idea of being a paladin or a cleric, not always, but like when I discovered what that class was. But and I couldn't just like, well, my cup was empty for sure, but I couldn't even think about giving. All I could think about was just like surviving, like, and because I wasn't giving, I wasn't getting anything either. Like what the course teaches, giving is receiving, right? So I was only just thinking about like the material, The ego literally lives by comparisons. Equality is beyond its grasp, and charity becomes impossible. The ego never gives out of abundance, because it was made as a substitute for it. That is why the concept of getting arose in the ego's thought system. Appetites are getting mechanisms, representing the ego's need to confirm itself. This is as true of the body's appetite as it is of the so-called higher ego needs. Body appetites are not physical in origin. The ego regards the body as its home and tries to satisfy itself through the body. But the idea that this is possible is a decision of the mind, which has become completely confused about what is really possible, right? It's like when we give out of abundance, it's like, what does it mean? I already have all that I need or all that I want, right? Which is spirit. And it's like, very, as I know, whatever your circumstances are, like, it's so easy to be not grateful. But we have, not saying like, never like striving for more, but it's not about this. It's just about like, when you have everything, it's just so easy to give. But when we feel like we're lacking, it's very difficult to give, And the ego literally lives by comparisons, right? Imagine you didn't compare yourself to anybody. Not to anybody. And you're just content of who you are. Looking at yourself with the eyes of the source. Wholly loving, wholly lovable as you are. Right? It says equality is beyond its grasp. Charity becomes impossible. It was like this nihilism, right? We're like, oh, this guy's better, this guy's worse. Like, look at the person worse. I'm better than him. Oh, this guy's better than me. Oh no. And it's a very exhausting way of life. Also, it's like you have to be hyper vigilant. Like, there's a stronger person. I gotta get rid of him. Weaker person, I have to get rid of him too to make myself, have even more power. And I don't think that's conducive to a healthy life, man. It's not, man. Like, right, the ego regards the body as its home and tries to satisfy itself through the body, right? And if you lived enough physical life experience, you understand like that the road doesn't really end well, right? There's things like overconsumption. I see with representation, like of Tata. What is obesity but overconsumption, or this endless pursuit of money, or of fame, whatever. It's just like endless appetite that can never be fulfilled. And we have to like make a decision to choose again, to choose the spirit over the ego. To understand this is a game, the ego game, we do not want to play it. You could catch yourself, like I catch myself. That's why I'm saying I'm never gonna say I'm this perfect guru, but just having awareness, like, oh, this is an ego game. I refuse to play it. The ego believes it is completely on its own, which is merely another way of describing how it thinks it originated. This is such a fearful state that it can only turn to other egos and try to unite with them in a feeble attempt at identification, or attack them in an equally feeble show of strength. It is not free, however, to open the premise to the question, because the premise is its foundation. The ego is the mind's belief that it is completely on its own. The ego's ceaseless attempts to gain the spirit's acknowledgement and thus establish its own existence are useless. Spirit, in its knowledge, is unaware of the ego. It does not attack it. It merely cannot conceive of it at all. While the ego is equally unaware of spirit, it does perceive itself as being rejected by something greater than itself. This is why self-esteem, in ego terms, must be delusional. The creations of God do not create myths, although creative effort can be turned to mythology. It can do so, however, only under one condition. What it makes is then no longer creative. Myths are entirely perceptual, and so ambiguous in form and characteristically good and evil in nature that the most benevolent of them is not without fearful connotations. I think this is like the crux of the issue what we've been talking about, guys, right? Right? The ego is the mind's belief that it's completely on its own, right? And we've created a very fearful existence, right? If we believe that we're all alone in this world with these hairless apes fighting for resources, all on its own, survival of the fittest, you know, and we can keep subscribing to this ego madness or choose again, you know. That's why I'm imploring all you guys, because we're not alone. We're all in this together, guys. We're all in this together, all of us. The purpose of the channel, right? To remember that we are unified, right? One mind, one humanity. The more I empower you, the more I feel empowered. But if we go attack, we're only attacking ourselves, you know? So if you're having these thoughts of nothing matters, remember, you do matter, right? You're an aspect of the infinite creator. You are as perfect as God created you at all times, even if you don't feel like it, right? And I encourage everyone just to do 1%, 1% of what you can do, right? And I say like, well, do your best, do your best. But sometimes it's like just 1% better, 1% better, right? It could be even being of service, 1%, right? Like these small steps, right? And you can show yourself like life is full of meaning. Well, Bashar says everything is inherently neutral, right? So it's meaningless has like no baked in meaning. We give life meaning. Because I saw how destructive this thought system was, and I don't want anyone else to feel that way. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Please subscribe if you enjoyed that healing content. May the Holy Spirit light up your path wherever it takes you. Take care.